A bird told me about this cool new thing that they were making. In order to prove it, I've summoned them here.
Heya. I say Serule, but Serule, like in Cerulean City, also works. Whatever's easier for you to say.
Dude, we're inside. Take off the hat. He reached out to tell me about an indie game he was making, one that was directly inspired by the Trauma Center series. As a quick little recap, they were a series of simcade surgery games developed by Atlus during the 2000s, with their last entry, Trauma Team, being released in 2010. As he predicted, I was interested, so when he went on to offer me an early access code to the demo, well, trying it out was no longer an option then. It became a desire. While the game itself is still in development, Serule has graciously offered a demo to be available on Steam in approximately, 0 minutes. Yes, if you go into the Steam page, linked in the description, you'll be able to play 6 of the game's episodes, 5 of them being a part of the main story. So, if you are already interested based on the mere idea of a Trauma Center-inspired game alone, I actually highly suggest that you stop watching now and go play the demo for yourself. There's a lot of stuff there that's worth experiencing firsthand, and I don't want to be the one to spoil it all for you, so yeah, go play it. Trust me, you're gonna have a fun time. If you're not able to right now, or you just want me to give my more general thoughts before going in, well, feel free to stick around a few more minutes. We'll even go through the prologue to get you jump started. And if you've already played the demo, well, we probably already share the same thoughts, but if you stick around, I'll have Serule pop in every now and then, offer a fun fact or two about something I'm looking at. Regardless of who you are, I appreciate you hearing me out. Because even with the demo being just a little under 2 hours, it's not even like the entire first chapter, mind you. I have a lot to say. Immediately, I'd like to focus on the game's presentation. Most surgically focused games that weren't Trauma Center were kind of just really unpleasant to look at. I know surgery itself is kind of hard to make pleasant, and that definitely can be used to its advantage, but unless you lean hard enough into a purely comical tone, sheesh. This is why the Trauma Center games are geared towards something more stylized, minimizing the level of that the average person would reach when playing, but also being down to earth enough to feel at least somewhat realistic. Under the Knife is the one exception, but as for second opinion onward, on a meter of till I like it, Complications would be so visually distinct from the organs, you always knew where to direct your eyes. To stand out from all this, Serule's own toony, simple art style ended up helping out in creating a look that's digestible, but also possible to take seriously. Mix in a bit of color theory and you have yourself a cartoony, softer art style that, at least to me, is so far detached from human surgery, obviously, that it's probably the most pleasant surgery has ever looked, without going way too abstract, of course.
Yeah, there's sort of a sweet spot of the overall feeling that I'm hoping to achieve. It's something in between serious but also lighthearted. I'm not looking for CE-ROM to be a super intense medical drama, but I also want the story to have the capability of carrying emotionally, and not to be totally wacky like Amateur Surgeon, for example. Danganronpa and 999 have similar levels of suspension of disbelief that I'm going for. Lots of well-earned story punches, but also a lot of general whimsy to balance things out. Trauma Center's wackiness with Guilt, the healing touch, and its somewhat outlandish story beats serve it well and help lighten the mood a bit, and I'm hoping CE-ROM's anthropomorphic animals and cool tech can do something similar.
I don't know about y'all, but I think you hit that sweet spot. Surgery may be a tough thing to show a person, but throw in enough elements to bring some lighthearted vibes into it, and something much more palatable can take shape. But Serule isn't just good at making art. Presentation is only one part of game design. Not only does it gotta function, but you gotta make your gameplay stand out somehow. Which is why I'm curious if there was anything in the Trauma Center games that you felt had gone underutilized, that you're actually going to be expanding upon for this game in particular.
It's a bit of a tough question, since in my opinion Trauma Center has already covered a lot of ground, and it did it quite well. In fact, that might explain why there hasn't been a new one in years. Now, I really wanted to make sure Cutting Edge Roots of Mutation isn't a retread, and that it explores new and interesting ideas. I think a world full of animal people undergoing the dawn of cybernetics is perfect for that. There's a lot of potential.
While playing the game, it was extremely clear to me that Serule knew what makes the Trauma Center games fun, and more importantly, how to build off of that foundation. Sure, we've had surgery simulation games before, but ever since Trauma Team on the Wii, to my knowledge, we never saw a developer make surgery engaging and arcadey like this. Not only did he stand off the edges, but he figured out ways to iterate on existing ideas, and made it work naturally with the world and its setting. Like, take vital management for example. In the TC games, unless you were Naomi, there was only really one way to quickly increase a patient's vitals, using a syringe to stick that stabilizer in them. This works, but how do you exactly expand upon this? Well, how about introducing a targeting system, where the amount of vitality gained is dependent on where you're injecting it? How about a new scan ability that allows you to see where said target is, and also kinda works as an ultrasound replacement? How about a nail that you can screw in that literally boosts your patient's vitality rates to a more manageable level as a lifeline? And the gel? Just cut it. Make it a blowtorch instead that can be used in a new variety of ways. Just with a few tool changes and a few procedural tweaks, our utility has gotten much more versatile, allowing for even more gameplay opportunities while minimizing the number of tasks that we just have to miss out on doing now. Like, I can't rub the gel before finishing an operation, but I do get to play with fire now. That is cool! And about that nail I mentioned, there will be moments where you might not want to stick it in the patient themselves, but in their cybernetic parts instead. It's pretty cool how this game uses its setting to its advantage. It's embracing the more cartoony look to create a world with gameplay opportunities that don't feel like it's just doing what the old games did. Cybernetic enhancements, the anatomy of anthropomorphic animals, a rework of existing procedures now considered old. The Trauma Center never really tackled these, which makes Cutting Edge feel remarkably refreshing. When you're operating on patients with cybernetic parts, it has the potential to feel like working on two different patients at the same time. I mean, the game seemingly wants you to see it that way too. The part's condition itself is a secondary health bar. It'll naturally improve as you repair it, but if it reaches 0, it's an instant game over. At least you can use that stabilizer on the patient, but the longer you take to repair the part, the more damage will be dealt to its condition, which is something you can't just use a syringe on. This is just one of the many ways that the game encourages the player to stay engaged, to develop a sort of flow state, if you will, while they're knowingly gunning a giraffe. There's a lot to love here. Not only is it, as I said, building on that strong foundation, it's putting its own twist on it to keep things interesting, both for new and old players alike. The serious yet eased tone that the original series held onto is still here, just tackled in its own way and with an added dose of lightheartedness. And as someone who loved that original series, it feels like I'm being rewarded for holding that veteran knowledge. Heck, I started feeling at home about as early as the title screen. Whoa. The clean logo design, the flower petals floating around in the background, and how it starts off booting up by literally opening an eye that encompasses the entire screen. It's so foreboding, I love this! In addition to all the futuristic mechanical bits and pieces of the interface, there's also an added sense of cautious intrigue. KTAS, what is that? What's a cyberdoc? Not authorized. Naturally, I want the answer to these questions, so yeah, let's play. Spooky. We open up to a seemingly intense situation at Sweet Bay Hospital. There was a car crash, someone's in critical condition, very serious stuff. However, our protagonist, Perry Maddock, seems to actually be quite fairly relaxed, all things considered. Why? Well, why should they be worried? It's Periwinkle frickin' Maddock, bro! They're the seasoned, well-revered doctor, the plumbed basilisk that everyone knows can be relied on. They may have only been a doctor for 1 year, but so far, they have yet to lose a single patient. Not just that, but they were fortunate enough to be one of the guinea pigs for the KTAS cybernetic eye, an enhancement implant that should help them during operations.
Being the playable character, I wanted Perry to be relatable with both newcomers and surgery sim vets alike. That's why you'll find that Perry is already a pretty skilled surgeon, but also one who's thrust into a new and unfamiliar world. They're also currently the only character with a gradient in their body colors.
This is a perfect protagonist. Serule knew. He knew that a good chunk of the people playing this game were going to be people that were already familiar with the Trauma Center series. As a result, instead of giving us an amateur Derek Styles for the new guys, or a super skilled Steer Wrestle 1 for the veterans, we are instead given something closer to a Marcus, that, as we will soon see, will force to become more like a Derek, as we will as well. This ensures that new players will be eased in, while us old veterans are going to be welcomed back, like old friends, going back to where it all began. It's so nice. Perry is awesome. So, yeah, worry? What do they gotta be worried about? Nah, let the worrying be held for the nurse. Like Hannah Nelson, a nurse from the same hospital. She's the one who's been assisting Perry since they began using the KTAS eye. If anyone's keeping her ducks in a row, it seems to be her. Anyway, back to the patient. Before we can treat them, it looks like Kobold Meditech, the company that created the KTAS, wants Perry to do this operation a bit differently. According to Spark, Perry's best friend and technician at Kobold, we need to have this operation video recorded so that the company can collect data for the eye. This Fennec Fox has a great personality. I like how he's usually the one breaking the tension whenever we're in the middle of something that's a bit serious. Even if it's gotta be with fishing puns.
Spark's original reason for existing was to be your old friend who helps guide you with all the new techie stuff. He's got other plot relevance now too, of course. His visual design was also the second one that I finished. His other potential names included amp, baud, diode, fuse, gain, ground, meter, short, socket, and wire. I think I like Spark the best though.
Yeah, I agree. Spark's pretty cool. There's a bit of pushback, but since corporate really wants to put a rush on the tech, Hannah and Perry begrudgingly comply, rationalizing that the tech could really help more people once it's out on the market. It was really around here that I began to appreciate just how this game handles its novel segments. It's exactly how you'd expect it to play out, but the little changes and quality of life features do help modernize the visual novel format from the original games. Autoplay, a clearly defined fast forward function, a transcript. If they weren't here, I'd be a little sad. Outside of text scrolling though, there are also moments where you are presented with dialogue options that, while they don't affect the story, do present opportunities to sprinkle in some more characterization. If you want to see everything these characters have to say, well, you have the option to. If you don't, well, you don't need to. As for me, I like the option to. The characters are quite interesting, even with the limited time we get to spend with them. I think that's enough story for now, however. Without further ado, I think it's time we actually save Bill. This wolf was in a car crash, but the procedure itself is pretty standard. I don't see this guy dying from a few shards of glass, and it also gives us a chance to take a look at our incredibly sleek interface. It's so techy, which makes sense since we're looking at this patient through the lens of the KTAS eye itself. Coming from Trauma Center, everything noteworthy is pretty much where you expect it to be. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, a newcomer to the screen are these directives here in the upper left, letting us know of any optional goals to keep track of. They aren't needed to complete the operation, but they will offer a bonus to your score. I'm actually glad that we can see these now rather than learning about them after the fact. If at all. We're introduced to 4 tools here. The syringe, forceps, and sutures are all exactly what you'd expect coming from the original games. The syringe can inject stablers and other fluids, the forceps can pull items out or close up gaps, and the sutures can close up lacerations. The 4th tool we get taught about, however, is the eye scanner. By pressing and holding space, you'll be able to see just how much damage each wound will cause over a minute, giving you the ability to know what's hurting the patient the most. And, as I mentioned, it'll also be great for finding that sweet spot where your stabilizer is more effective. You may want to be mindful whenever using it, however, as you'll have to wait a few seconds before being able to scan again. As I said before, it's pretty much an ultrasound without the tool space, a new cooldown, and a whole lot more purpose. And there we go! All injuries dealt with, I think. Uh-oh. Looks like the patient is suffering from abdominal compartment syndrome, a buildup of pressure in the abdomen. At least the treatment shouldn't be too bad, we just need to relieve it of that pressure by making a few incisions and then suturing them right back up. This should be no big deal. Our characters seem to notice that something is a bit off, however. Normally it'd just have to be done once, but the K-Taz keeps suggesting to make more incisions. Well, maybe this is just a really rare coincidence. The eye can't be wrong, can it? Uh-oh. Yeah, the eye suddenly just starts going haywire. Perry considers stopping the operation, but out of fear of being replaced, they press on, regardless of what the eye tells them to do. Incision after incision, we were warned that every cut will make a drop to the vitals, but with them no longer on display and Perry becoming increasingly tunnel visioned on the eye's instructions, I felt stressed just playing this firsthand. And talk about a way to unsettle the player. The static, the muffled music, the glitching text that seemed to make out a message. It's really disturbing. In all the right ways, of course. I genuinely got chills. I never felt scared or discouraged from continuing, however, and I think you can thank the presentation for that. The tension, however, it just keeps building and building, all the way up until... And I'm gonna temporarily stop here for a moment. The demo goes past this point, don't worry. But again, I really do suggest that you give the game's demo a shot before seeing my own take on the more in-depth bits of the game and its story. I personally find it to be really compelling, so please, if you can, experience it for yourself first. If you still can't play it, then only continue if you're alright with the story and more gameplay mechanics being spoiled for you. It may not be the story of the whole game, but a lot does change after this point. So, there you go. With you properly warned, feel free to click off this video now or go to this timestamp if you want to avoid it. Otherwise, 3, 2, 1... One year later, we learn that after an incredibly long-winded investigation, Perry was found not at fault for the incident. Weirdly enough, neither was the K-Taz. Since then, Kobold Meditech was able to launch their cybernetic body part lineup to the public, parts that could emulate senses, effectively curing disabilities such as deafness and blindness. It was niche, sure, but it opened the gate to more miraculous cures and cybernetically enhanced people. With these new synthro link parts, Kobold seems to plan on advancing society into a new era, one pushed with cybernetic power. Spark has since left the company, mostly due to frustration with how Kobold was never held accountable. And Perry, well, even though everyone has deemed them not responsible for the incident, they still seem to blame themselves for it. Their confidence was practically shattered by the whole ordeal, which is why Spark invites them to Blue Bonnet Hospital. With their medical license reinstated, they can do a bit of observing and maybe even give being a doctor another shot. We have no time to waste, however, as Spark is suddenly called to handle a surgeon's malfunctioning pair of arms. Wait, what? Well, as doctors kept cybernetically enhancing themselves to better treat their patients, cyberdocs became a new class of doctors over the past year. As a result, the technicians like Spark were needed to maintain them. With a patient in critical condition and the only free cyberdoc malfunctioning at the moment, well, let's just say that this ain't the time to be observing anymore. Spark offers Perry up for the job, and while they are hesitant at first, Perry gives in, motivated by a desire to help people, even if it means being legally obligated to turn the eye back on again. Alright, time to save Travis. This gray wolf was also in a car accident. Ugh. At least that means it shouldn't be so bad, giving us a chance to learn about the stabilizer's extra layer of depth. That is to say, we're actually using a new product known as nanites now. It's weaker when used randomly, but as I said before, it now works even better in specific spots, which you'll need to find by scanning with the eye. We're also properly introduced to the time limit. Reaching 0 won't result in the game over, but the patient will lose vitals with increasing intensity over time, to the point where it may as well be. At least I think that's the intended mechanic. The thing is, with how much time we're given and how strong the nanites can be when used on their target spot, in addition to the fact that you can't exhaust the tool, the time limit penalty kinda just becomes moot the moment it's introduced. Maybe it's because of the operation in particular, and I do think the penalty's severity is also tied to the amount of wounds present, but I don't think an intended gameplay scenario involves just sticking nanites in the patient nearly 3 minutes in overtime, just to be pretty much completely fine. The red interface certainly gives off the impression that the patient is in critical danger, I imagine to encourage the player to lock in, but with the vitals being so easy to top off, it's kinda hard to really sell it the way it currently is. How do you want the players to feel when they're completing these surgeries?
If you're familiar with the concept of the flow state, basically that. There's a fine line between a game being too difficult or frustrating and it being side monitor content. Ideally, the player will be able to complete most surgeries in their first go, even if there are a few close calls along the way. More difficult surgeries might take another attempt or two, but hopefully the player will feel that their surgical skills are improving as they progress, and by the time they reach the endgame, they'll be astonished they had any trouble with the earlier procedures.
On the hardest difficulty, I doubt being able to do this was intended. It may not be how everyone would play it, but just knowing that it's possible, it did kind of destroy the need to enter that flow state he's aiming for. One of the most important aspects of the original games, for me at least, was their difficulty. Their ability to keep me on my toes with challenging, but usually fair stakes. And the time limit, while all it did was give me a game over, it did motivate me to stay as engaged as possible. I don't want to be incredibly harsh on this point, however. The game is still being worked on after all, and I'm sure Serule has a vision for how he wants Cutting Edge to challenge his players. I just want to make sure that I call out on this early on, so that on Cyberdock at least, it is ensured that it'll be challenging, because that's why players will be choosing that difficulty, to be challenged. I should also point out that I only really felt this way with the first 2 operations. I'm actually fine with how much time 1.3 and 1.4 gave us, albeit for different reasons, but I stand by the idea that if we're going to be penalized for going over the time limit, at the very least, Cyberdock should really slam us for it, rather than feeling more like a small inconvenience. You can finish a lot of these early surgeries really quickly, so clipping that safety net can do quite a lot for getting players to lock in. In fact, that idea is kinda already there. You get 1 minute less in this operation on Cyberdock, but it's just not enough. 6 minutes, it's just way too much in my opinion. For this mission in particular, make that bonus goal the standard and then cut the bonus by like 45 seconds. That'll get me to lock in. Would have made sense too, given the patient did spend a good chunk of the chapter just dying on a waitlist. It's already better by default by having additional complications. If anything, throw even more surprises my way, please. Heck, that challenge mission was practically perfect in terms of difficulty for me. I felt like I was really being tested here, and seeing that time warning message actually added so much to making me lock in, even if I was just about to finish. If the story missions pressured me in similar ways on Cyberdock, I'd have no issues with it at all. Enough about the difficulty though. With Travis saved, Perry gains a little bit of street cred. Only really with Brooke and Daniel, however. Turns out the patient hated the fact that Perry had practically nothing cybernetic attached to them, to the point where he yells at them, storms off, and files a malpractice report on them? Well, that's rude. This chapter is also where we're introduced to these 2 guys. By the way, Brooke Sharpfin is the nurse shark that people often fear due to her attitude. Fun fact.
Brooke's last name, Sharpfin, is actually a holdover from her placeholder name. That name was NS, short for literally Nurse Shark. In fact, Dr. Larson always refers to her as Nurse Sharp. Anyway, sharp-eyed viewers should keep their eyes peeled, because parts of her design are actually very plot relevant. You'll see later.
And we're also introduced to Daniel Larson, a honey badger of a cyberdoc that fixed himself with many cybernetic enhancements to perform surgery with incredible speed and precision.
Now, lots of my friends read Dr. Larson's dialogue in a Russian accent. I didn't really mean to write him like that, but I also don't think they're that far off, truth be told. Also, Dr. Larson's first name, Daniel, is meant to remember a friend of mine in high school who sadly isn't with us anymore. As for the other characters, you'll see them more later on in the story, like Hannah and Widget. Character designs and sprites take a lot of time to make, and it would be pretty silly not to use them, wouldn't it?
I love this cast of characters we've been introduced to. Not only are they themselves entertaining to see interact with each other, but some also seem to carry something of a personal meaning with Serule himself. It shows that he cares. I imagine writing a compelling story with interesting characters can be difficult, especially for a one-man team, but it is something that, for me at least, breathes essential life into it, which is why I commend him for opting into it.
I hope you guys will find the characters and story interesting. I actually considered not including a story since it's a lot of work, but I figured it's a pretty big reason why the actual operations themselves feel impactful.
You figured right, Serule, and in my opinion, you've built a world I want to see more of. That is pretty dope. Heading back to the story, Perry continues to struggle with some self-doubt after how that patient reacted, but at least their efforts are being noticed, if elsewhere. With a string or two pulled from Spark, Perry is offered a position at Blue Bonnet. They have to be evaluated first, however, and what better way to evaluate a surgeon than to see them operate? Todd here has some hemochromatosis due to a malfunctioning hybrid synthetic liver. Bleh. If Perry wants to be hired, they're gonna have to learn quickly how to operate on these things, which means it's time to get introduced to 3 new tools. The vacuum itself is pretty much how the drain has always been. It can suck up pools of blood and other liquids. Meanwhile, we have the driver. You'll use it to unscrew screws, inject nails made of concentrated nanites, and seemingly more. I like the idea of having to manage the nails you collect as well. At the start, you'll only use like one nail type at a time, but the game does throw other types of nails at you later on, which, to me, hints that maybe there'll be more to do with this container later on. And for the third, we have the Exo Torch, great for melting hardened liquids, generating heat, cauterizing wounds, and dehydrating tumors. Sometimes you'll need to be careful of how much heat you're applying, however, since too much can sometimes also damage the patient. Taking care of Todd isn't so bad, just a few replacement parts here and there, a few pools of blood cleaned up, and a hint of nail tightening to make him good as new. Kobold may be getting sloppy with their part support, but hey, at least we're out here keeping them functional. Overclock unlocked. Huh. Might as well talk about them now, since this is when I got my first one. The overclocks are basically small configs that you can equip that'll add some kind of adjustment to your tools. I was curious, what sparked your idea for the overclock system to begin with?
I think Spark would be proud of your pun. But anyway.
I didn't even notice that.
I thought it would be interesting to include some customization. Many other games do some sort of perk or skill system. In fact, New Blood sort of had this in that you could actually choose which healing touch you wanted to use. Now, I thought about making a granular tech tree at first, but I really wanted overclocks to actually feel impactful. 2% healing isn't really going to be noticeable. And having to respect a ton of skill points for specific operations sounded tedious at best. Now, I settled on the current idea of just one overclock after playing another game called Tokyo Extreme Racer. In that game, you can pick one and only one perk. But the perk was actually pretty impactful, and you could swap them out pretty easily, which I really like as it reduces analysis paralysis. But anyway, for most people, I think overclocks will be an easy and fast way to tweak tools to better fit your own playstyle. And I also think it will be interesting for score or time attackers, since trying to figure out how to take advantage of specific overclocks and specific operations could be an interesting problem to solve in itself.
Diving a bit more into the system itself, there are basic overclocks which give a small boost without any drawback, like making nanites 10% more effective. Advanced overclocks give a better boost with a small drawback, such as making nanites 20% more effective at the cost of syringe capacity. And lastly, extreme overclocks, which give the best boost but at a significant drawback, like making the nanites 35% more effective at the disadvantage of making the target area much smaller. Personally, I love the driver and blowtorch overclocks the most. The former makes screwing in nails more timing based, rather than needing you to circle your cursor around the nail to screw it in. The latter makes the blowtorch much more effective, but at the cost of immediately damaging the patient and the synthetic part while in use, meaning you'll need to be much more careful with it. Overall, it's pretty neat to have a little bit of customization. There will be moments where you prefer one over the other, encouraging engagement. It's just a solid idea all around. While we're on the screen, I might as well point it out now, there is also a score and ranking system, which I think Serule did a pretty good job at figuring out how to make it reward skill appropriately. With enough solid speed and technique, the highest rank, XS, may be challenging, but it is fun to obtain, and that's really all I can ask for from a ranking system. There's also a leaderboard if you care extra about the score or time attack. Neat. Going back to the story, after a bit of time trying to treat other patients, Perry gets consistently reminded of how far behind they are now. With the medical landscape changing so much within the past year while they were absent, Perry can't help but doubt their usefulness. Meanwhile, Spark is getting a new part to help a patient with. As much as he hates needing to work with Kobold for it, the fact that everyone and everything is relying on their tech makes it practically impossible to try other companies. Yeah, as great as those cybernetic parts may have been for treating patients, it also gave way for Kobold to have a complete monopoly on it. Practically everything done at the hospital nowadays is at their behest. Even the nanites were made by them. Anyway, Mel the giraffe is in need of a microchip replacement in his kidney. That part that Spark was getting, it was for this. It's during this operation that we learn the last of the basics. First, we can use nanite auto-injectors as a lifeguard. If the patient is really low on the vitals, this can help even out the odds. We only get a limited number of these per operation though, so use them wisely. Second, we get a better chance to see the synthetic part's condition have more of a role during operations. As I said before, you'll need to balance the patient's vitals and the condition of the part, as losing out on either will result in a game over. Those nanite nails, they'll only work on the area of your choice, so again, be wise with them. And finally, we get to use our final tool, the Streamlined Logic Editing Device, or SLED for short. This handy tool was custom made by Spark himself, mostly because the device that Kobold wants him to use was slow and clunky. Not great when patients need help now. We'll be using it to diagnose, temporarily disable, or mod synthetic parts, and so far, I absolutely love the potential this tool gives. It gives us little puzzles or tasks that we need to solve in real time, which means it can only progress if we deliberately take time away from the patient's condition to work on it. This incorporates another level of multitasking in a way that I really hope continues to get utilized in the full game. Imagine the intensity of needing to solve these puzzles as complications arrive within the patient. That's a solid gameplay scenario, and we get a taste of that here. I can tell this is going to be the main highlight of the game for me. It may not have been particularly difficult this time, but because of how much more strongly it commanded my engagement, I love this concept. The SLED is easily my favorite tool at the moment. I just feel like it has so much potential in terms of how it's used, and well, actually, I'm willing to bet, between the new tools, which one was the most fun to implement?
I could talk about any of them, but if I had to pick, it would be the SLED. Since it's essentially a hacking tool and unique in that it's not bound by any physical actions, there are tons of possibilities for its minigames. I think the most fun part for me, though, is designing all of the SLED's informational screens. It's small, but if you look at the SLED screen really closely, every single component has a unique UI, or at least unique console text associated with it. It'll say something different between when you first hook it up and when you're actually done fixing it.
Yeah, you definitely know what you're working with here. Respect. Respect. Back to the operation, it looks like the chip Spark ordered was the wrong model. This wasn't a mistake on Spark's part, however. Rather, Kobold had stopped making the correct chip type a while back, practically forcing patients like Mel to purchase an upgrade if they wanted to be treated. Risky as it is, modding the chip was the only way to circumvent this issue. So we're technicians now. Talk about potential, man. I freaking love this thing. On to the next episode, we get to focus a bit more on Brooke now, mostly through a short one-on-one between her and Perry. It's here that we're kind of pushed to let her know a bit about the K-Taz Eye, specifically the fact that it is a K-Taz to begin with. Brooke seemed to be quite rattled by the information though. Not only did she immediately shut down the conversation, but suddenly started treating Perry really coldly from this moment onward. Who the heck is Ozzy? That has to wait for now though. Daniel has introduced us to the next patient. It looks like Mina has some tumors that need extracting, giving us a chance to learn how to do just that. It's a standard, simple process, but hey, needing most of your arsenal for it is pretty stellar. We regain Brooke's trust through Perry's skill, but we also get to visually see just how big the gap is between them and Daniel, a Class A cyberdoc. Whoa. After seeing that, Perry continues to wonder how useful they can really be. They may have been able to catch some tumors that even Daniel couldn't detect, but if the patient is in a dire condition, it becomes pretty clear how much better suited cyberdocs are. Okay, fun fact, I actually abused the nanites to see just how far I could go into this segment of the operation. You're supposed to ultimately fail and let Daniel finish it for you, but turns out, you get some unique dialogue if you manage to get far enough. That was really neat. I like the reference. I kinda wish I was allowed to finish. The operation itself was challenging enough, though I'd say giving us one less minute would have helped up the ante on Cyberdock, not just for completing it normally, but for score and time attack as well. Either way, pretty fun episode. And hey, Daniel seems to be pretty trusting of Perry now, trusting enough to let them operate on his arms. More slide usage? So, despite Spark's best efforts, Daniel's arms have been malfunctioning, rendering him unable to perform surgery nearly all the time. That one moment in 1-4 being more of an exception, if anything. Seems like a little exploratory surgery is in order, which of course means more sled usage. Yes! There's less at stake this time. Daniel won't die if we end up failing, but we still gotta worry about the part's condition. With the sled, we do some diagnostic testing on multiple parts of the arm, but despite our efforts and our problem-solving skills, the crew fails to find any underlying issues. No one's really quite sure what to do at this point. Whoa. Perry starts to worry, but then quickly realizes how differently it feels this time. With the headache subsiding and no voice being heard, he notices that the K-Taz is pointing him towards the true underlying issue. None of the characters are sure what it is, but at least we were able to destroy it with the driver. With the operation complete and Daniel's arms seemingly fixed, he immediately rushes off with Spark and Brooke to operate on a patient that was just admitted. Left alone, Perry just couldn't be convinced that they serve any purpose here. The operation may have been successful, but with the gap between them and just about every doctor here, Perry can't even bring themselves to claim that victory. Just as they were leaving their badge at the front desk, Perry kept getting these random error messages, similar to the ones that he saw when he operated on Daniel's arms. He's unsure what they mean at first, but when the hospital starts calling for backup to the same operating room that Daniel ran to, Perry begins to wonder if these messages are referring to him. Bracing himself to at least try, Perry rushes off, hoping that even if he may not carry many cybernetics, maybe they can still be of use. Which is right where the demo ends. You really got me there. As crushing as this cliffhanger is, I am more than excited to see where the story takes us in the final release. There's potential for an amazing game here. The kind of game that I think would actually generate some buzz if it were presented at like a Nintendo Indie World or something. Of course, that would mean it'd have to get a Switch 2 port, and I assume we're a long way from that kind of thing. I know you're focusing on Steam right now, but I'm curious, what do you think?
Yes, right now I'm working solo without any publishers, and I'm focused on releasing a feature-complete game on Steam. There will be no development hell here, trust me. That being said, if I could get the game onto the Switch 2, that would be absolutely amazing. Like, are you kidding me? The Switch 2's mouse control mode would be perfect for CE-ROM, and wouldn't it be amazing to have a surgery game released on Nintendo hardware? Like, come on.
Right you are. Well, there you go.
Thanks for taking the time to interview me, Chris.
Yes, of course, man. We may be a long way from the game's full release, but as for now, I am just glad to be able to play something like this officially on a computer in 2025. And I know that this is more of a personal reason, but as someone who studied game development, I want to see where this goes. I want to see how it's made. And I am honored to have been granted the opportunity to try it out early. Despite seeing pretty much everything the demo itself has to offer, I could definitely see myself booting it up every now and then just for the sake of being in that flow state. It's also extremely fun to speedrun once you get into it. Like, this is how I played 1.5 on my first playthrough. I'm having fun, we're playing casually. I don't mind taking a few seconds to heat up this fan. I'm enjoying my time. But after playing around with the tools, becoming adept at the game's mechanics, and willfully experimenting, it's really satisfying using that to optimize either your score or your time. And with 2 distinct leaderboards for each, you may be encouraged to tackle whichever you want. Can someone stand up to Mr. UPS man? FedEx can't keep up. This game has my respects, not just because it's really well made, but because it's filling a niche that hasn't been filled in 15 years. And man, it just gets it, It feels so good being able to play this in 2025. The gameplay is fun and engaging, the art is pleasant to look at, the world and its characters are all compelling. This is all coming from a developer that clearly loves the series he's been taking inspiration from. If you want to financially support the game's creation, feel free to subscribe to his Patreon, where Serule will offer posts with an even more in-depth look into the game's development. Otherwise, there's also a Discord server to hop into, where you can feel free to discuss the game's demo and offer your feedback as well. Or talk about your favorite ice cream flavor. We don't judge. As much as I love traditional platformers, racing games, RPGs, and the variety of other genres out there, a surgery simcade as unique as this? That can stick with you. Which is why, if you want a second opinion, Cutting Edge Root to Mutation deserves your attention. Keep an eye on this one, because I know I am.